My husband's family threw an engagement party for his brother. I wasn't invited. Family only, his mother said. He went without me. I spent that evening making phone calls. The next morning, his mother's country club membership was revoked. Her charity board asked her to step down. His father's golf club canceled their membership. When they discovered why and who I'd called, they finally asked who I really was. The silence here is heavy now, filled with the dust of a demolished life. It started yesterday, standing by the bedroom window. I watched Leo adjust his silk tie in the mirror. He avoided my gaze, focusing on the knot as if it were a complex engineering problem. The invitation never arrived. Just a quiet edict delivered by his mother, Eleanor. A week prior, I was the wife of 6 years, yet I remained a variable they refused to solve. Leo smoothed his jacket, the fabric whispering in the quiet room. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. He knew this was wrong, but he was leaving. "It's just intimate family, Gianna," he said to his reflection, finally meeting my eyes in the glass. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tick I used to find endearing. "You know how Mom gets about tradition. It's Simon's engagement. I don't want to cause a scene." He turned around, hands open in a plea for absolution. He wanted me to make it easy for him. He wanted me to say it was fine to treat me like a stranger. I didn't smile. "I am your immediate family," I said, my voice dangerously steady. "I am your wife." Leo winced, checking his watch. "I know, it's just for tonight. Please, don't make this difficult." That phrase snapped the last thread of my patience. Difficult. For 6 years, I had been easy. I had swallowed every insult. Every seating arrangement at the children's table. Every snide comment about my art restoration career being a hobby. Being easy had gotten me nothing but erased. Being difficult was the only option left. "I have to go," he muttered, grabbing his keys. He kissed my cheek. A dry, cowardly peck that felt like a dismissal. "Don't wait up." He walked out, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. I waited for the elevator chime. Then the heavy thud of the building's front door. The apartment was silent, but the air felt charged, like the moments before a thunderstorm. I didn't cry. Tears were for people who hoped things would change on their own. I was done hoping. I was ready to work. I walked past the living room into my study. Leo rarely entered this room. He thought it was filled with dusty rags and varnish. He saw my job as cleaning old pictures. He never understood my work was preservation, knowing the true value of things, and knowing the people who owned them. My clients were the people his parents tried to impress. I sat at my desk and opened my contact list. It wasn't a list of customers. It was an arsenal. I picked up the phone. The desk lamp cast a pool of clinical white light over my restoration tools. To Eleanor, this room was where I glued broken plates and wasted my time. To Arthur Linwood, director of the City Museum, this was a sanctuary of miracle work. I dialed his private line, my fingers steady on the screen. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm with the familiarity of late night gallery prep. I skipped the pleasantries. I didn't frame it as a complaint. "Arthur, I am reviewing the donor list for the new wing," I said, keeping my voice professional and detached. "I noticed Eleanor Lockwood is chairing the Inclusivity Gala. It strikes me as a conflict." I let the silence stretch, heavy and pregnant. Arthur knew my husband's family well. More importantly, he knew I never gossip. I explained the family only policy that explicitly excluded a wife of 6 years. I heard the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Arthur valued optics above all else. A chairwoman preaching unity while publicly erasing her daughter-in-law was a liability he couldn't afford. "That is disappointing," he murmured, the warmth gone from his tone. "Hypocrisy is a stain that doesn't wash out, Gianna. Thank you for the discretion." The line went dead. I didn't feel a thrill of victory. I felt the cold click of a lock sliding into place. One pillar of Eleanor's world was already crumbling. I dialed the next number. Miranda Thorne ran the city's most vicious social chronicle. She also owned a collection of damaged Renaissance sketches I had secretly restored for free last winter. She owed me. Gianna, she purred, the background noise of a gala humming behind her. Tell me you are calling to collect. I told her everything. I didn't ask for a headline. I asked for a whisper. Miranda dealt in narrative, and the cruel matriarch was a story she loved to tell more than any other. Consider it done. Darling, Miranda promised, ice clinking in her glass. I am actually looking at Eleanor right now. She's wearing that dreadful peach chiffon. By the time dessert is served, everyone at her table will know she considers marriage a temporary arrangement. I hung up, picturing the scene vividly. Eleanor smiling, holding court, unaware that the air around her was turning toxic. The whispers would travel faster than champagne. But the social cut wasn't enough. I needed to hit the money. Benji wasn't just a tech billionaire. He had recently bought the prestigious Westwind Country Club. He hated bullies. I had witnessed Eleanor berating a young waitress there 2 weeks ago, snapping her fingers like the girl was a dog. I had stayed silent then, preserving the peace. Now, I recounted the incident to Benji, adding the context of my own exclusion. That's a pattern, Benji said, his voice flat. Our bylaws are strict about conduct unbecoming. I'll pull the security footage. 3 calls, 30 minutes. I placed the phone face down on the mahogany desk. My hands weren't shaking anymore. For years, the Lockwoods had made me feel small, like a speck of dust in their grand manner. But looking around my study, surrounded by the tools of my trade, I realized something terrifying. They were just old canvas, brittle and cracking under the weight of their own egos. I was the solvent. I turned off the lamp, leaving them in the dark. The morning light hit the marble countertop with an unforgiving brightness. I measured loose, leaf tea into the strainer, the metal clinking softly against the ceramic mug. The front door clicked open, followed by the heavy, stumbling tread of a man trying to be quiet. Leo appeared in the kitchen doorway, his tuxedo shirt unbuttoned and stained with red wine. He looked like the wreckage of a celebration I wasn't allowed to see. He rubbed his temples, wincing at the sun. You are up early, he croaked. He moved to the fridge, ignoring the tension radiating from my stillness. It was fine. You didn't miss much, he lied, twisting the cap off a bottle of sparkling water. Mom was just stressed. We can go over for brunch on Sunday. Smooth it over. He drank deeply, the carbonation hissing. He actually believed it. He thought 6 years of intentional erasure could be fixed with eggs Benedict and a polite smile. I took a slow sip of my tea. No, Leo. We won't. Before he could argue, his phone began to vibrate violently on the granite island. It danced across the surface, a manic, buzzing insect. He frowned, wiping his mouth. It's Dad. He swiped to answer, putting it on speaker to free his hands. Leo, are you sitting down? Gregory's voice was unrecognizable, stripped of its usual pompous boom, replaced by a jagged panic. Your mother just got an email from the Conservancy. They're removing her. Effective immediately. Leo froze, the water bottle halfway to his mouth. What? That's impossible. Leo stammered, gripping the counter until his knuckles turned white. She founded that board. Gregory didn't hear him, his voice rising in hysteria. And Westwind. A courier just delivered a letter. My membership is revoked. Conduct unbecoming. They have video footage, Leo, of your mother yelling at staff. Leo's face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. He looked at the phone as if it were a bomb. Woo, he whispered. Who has the pull to do this overnight? He hung up, his hands shaking so hard he nearly dropped the device. He looked at me, eyes wide and searching for a comfort I no longer possessed. Someone is attacking us, Gianna. It's a coordinated strike. Boards, clubs, reputation. It's total scorched earth. He ran a hand through his messy hair, pacing the small kitchen. I don't understand. We don't have enemies like this. I set my mug down with a deliberate, soft thud. You don't. I corrected him gently. But perhaps I do. He stopped pacing immediately. The silence that followed was heavy, sucking the air out of the room. He stared at me, really looked at me. For the first time in years. He saw the stillness of my hands, the complete lack of surprise in my eyes. The realization hit him like a physical blow, rocking him back on his heels. You. He breathed the word barely a sound. You made calls. But you just restore paintings. You don't know these people. He was struggling to recalibrate. I restore value, Leo, I said, leaning back against the counter. And I remove rot. It turns out I know exactly who matters in this city. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The terror in his eyes wasn't just for his parents anymore. It was for the stranger standing in his kitchen. Before he could speak, the intercom buzzed, a harsh, jagged sound that made him jump. It's them. He whispered, horrified. They're downstairs. The war had come to our doorstep. Leo buzzed them up, his finger shaking on the intercom button. The wait was suffocating, filled only by the hum of the refrigerator and Leo's ragged breathing. When the door finally flew open, Eleanor didn't wait for pleasantries or invitations. She was a vision of unraveled perfection. Her expensive blowout slightly askew and her eyes burning with a manic brightness. Gregory followed close behind, looking like a man trying to calculate the cost of a natural disaster. You petty little creature. Eleanor hissed. She bypassed her son entirely, marching across the living room to point a manicured finger at my chest. She was trembling with a rage that vibrated the air. You did this. I know it was you. Gregory grabbed her arm, trying to restrain her, though his own face was flushed a dangerous crimson. Eleanor, stop screaming. He barked, attempting to salvage some dignity. He turned his gaze on me, expecting the cowering. Silent daughter-in-law he'd ignored for 6 years. Leo says you made calls. That is absurd. Gregory continued, his voice dripping with condescension. Who could you possibly know? You fix old dishes, Gianna? You don't strip board memberships? He looked around our apartment with a sneer, dismissing my life as he always did. He wanted me to deny it. He needed me to be insignificant so his world made sense again. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked to the coffee table and picked up a coaster, correcting its alignment. Arthur Linwood, I said clearly. The name hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Director of the City Museum. He cares deeply about ethical consistency on his boards. Eleanor froze, her mouth falling open. Miranda Thorne? I continued, watching the color drain from Gregory's face. She was quite interested in the hypocrisy of your family values. The names hit them like physical slaps. These weren't just acquaintances or social climbers. These were their gods, the gatekeepers of the elite circles they worshipped. But how? Leo asked from the corner. Leo's voice was small, terrified. You know them. I looked at my husband, the man who had never once asked about my day or my clients. I restore their most precious possessions, Leo. I save the things they love when time threatens to destroy them. That buys a level of loyalty money can't purchase. I turned back to Eleanor, who was clutching her chest. You thought I was a cute hobbyist. You forgot that I am the one who sees the cracks before anyone else. Gregory was sputtering now, trying to find a foothold in the sliding sand. You slandered us. I'll sue. I'll have you buried in legal fees. I shook my head, almost pitying him. Benji Chun pulled the security tapes. Gregory. The video of Eleanor throwing wine at the server. It wasn't slander. It was evidence. Gregory looked at his wife, horror dawning. He realized the enemy wasn't outside the gates. The rot was inside his own marriage. and I had just handed over the flashlight. Eleanor sank onto the sofa, the fight leaking out of her posture. She looked at me, and for the first time in 6 years, there was no condescension in her eyes. There was only fear. She realized she was in a room with a predator she had mistaken for prey. "You ruined us," she whispered, clutching her pearls like a lifeline. "Over a party. You burned down our lives because you weren't invited to a dinner." Her voice trembled with genuine shock. "I didn't destroy anything," I said, my voice cold and final. "I just turned on the lights. If the room was dirty, that's not the fault of the switch." I opened the door, a silent command for them to leave. Gregory pulled a weeping Eleanor to her feet, stumbling into the hallway. They shuffled out, broken and gray. I closed the heavy door and turned around. Leo was staring at me, his back pressed against the wall, looking at his wife like she was a stranger. The silence in the apartment was heavy, settling like dust after a demolition. Leo sat on the ottoman, head in his hands, while the mid-afternoon sun mocked the gloom of our living room. The doorbell rang again, making him flinch violently. It wasn't an attack this time, it was a delivery. I signed for the long white box. Inside lay 24 blood, red roses, deep and velvety. The card wasn't romantic. It was thick cardstock, embossed with a crest I recognized immediately. I placed the card on the granite island. Leo picked it up, his fingers trembling as he read the script. "Jonathan Thorne," he whispered, his voice cracking. "My father has been trying to get a meeting with his firm for 5 years." He looked at the flowers, then at me, confusion warring with fear. The hierarchy he understood was dissolving in real time. I wasn't just the outcast wife anymore. I was a player on a board he hadn't known existed. "They're welcoming you?" he said hollowly. While they lock us out, Leo's phone buzzed on the counter, shattering the fragile quiet. It was Marcus, the eldest brother, the crown prince of Lockwood and Sons. Leo answered on speaker, his conditioned obedience kicking in instantly. "Leo, what the actual hell is happening?" Marcus didn't shout. He sounded like a CEO managing a toxic spill. "Clients are calling. Rumors are flying that mom committed fraud or dad is insolvent. People are saying the family is radioactive." Marcus wasn't worried about feelings. He was worried about the stock price. "It's Gianna," Leo admitted, his eyes fixed shamefully on the floor. She knew people we didn't know about." A cold, calculating silence stretched over the line. "Then handle her," Marcus commanded, his tone dropping to a dangerous calm. "Get her to recant. Make her call these people back. Say she was emotional. Say it was a misunderstanding. Fix this public relations nightmare today, Leo. Or don't bother coming in on Monday. We can't have a liability sitting in the C-suite." The line went dead, leaving the threat hanging in the kitchen sharp as a knife. Leo dropped the phone and looked at me with desperate, pleading eyes. "You have to call them back," he begged, stepping toward me. "Tell Arthur and Benji you overreacted. Please, Gianna. Marcus isn't bluffing. They'll cut me out of the firm." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a cover-up. He wanted me to humiliate myself to save his comfort. "I won't lie for you," I said softly, my resolve hardening into steel. "I won't tell the world I am crazy just to make your family look sane." Leo's face crumbled into a mix of anger and grief. "Do you want to destroy me? This is my career, Gianna. This is my name." That was it. The truth laid bare on the cold kitchen tiles. He wasn't grieving the way they had treated me. He was grieving the loss of his armor. I picked up the vase of roses and moved them to the dining table, claiming the space. "You are asking me to set myself on fire to keep them warm," I said, turning back to him. "I am done burning, Leo." He stood there, paralyzed by the impossible weight of the moment. I walked to the bedroom door and looked back at him one last time. Choose the marriage or choose the bloodline, Leo. But you don't get both anymore. I closed the door. 2 days of silence stretched between us like a physical expanse of dark water. I stayed in the apartment, surrounded by the quiet validation of my work, while Leo ghosted through hotels. Finally, a text appeared on my screen. Meet me at the Oak Room. 7 p.m. It was the bar where we had our first date. A place of dark wood and hushed secrets. I arrived 5 minutes early, wearing armor in the form of a tailored black dress. Leo was already there, staring into a whiskey glass. He looked older. He didn't stand when I approached the table, a breach of manners that signaled his exhaustion. His eyes were red-rimmed, the skin beneath them bruised with sleeplessness. I sat opposite him, ordering a sparkling water to keep my hands busy. I talked to them, he said, his voice scraping against the silence. I went to the house this morning. Marcus was there with Dad. He took a long, shuddering drink. They gave me the paperwork, a press release denouncing you. They wanted my signature by noon today. I watched his hands tremble as he set the glass down on the coaster. The condensation pooled around the base. A small flood on the polished wood. I told them no. Leo whispered, refusing to meet my gaze. I told them that what they did to you was cruel. I told them I wouldn't lie to save their reputation. My heart hammered a sudden, hopeful rhythm against my ribs. He had done it. He had finally stood up. But his face didn't hold the flush of victory. It held the gray pallor of a funeral. Marcus didn't even blink. Leo continued, tracing the rim of his glass. He just slid the resignation letter across the desk. He said if I couldn't protect the family name, I didn't deserve to carry it. Leo looked up then, and the emptiness in his eyes chilled me. I signed it, Gianna. I resigned. Effective immediately. I walked out of the building without my pass, without my laptop, without anything. He laughed, a dry, cracking sound. I am not a VP anymore. I'm not a Lockwood. I'm nothing. I reached across the table to touch his hand, but he pulled away as if burned. This is what you wanted, isn't it? He asked, not with anger, but with a terrible, flat curiosity. You wanted them to pay. You wanted me to choose. I pulled my hand back, feeling the sting of his withdrawal. I wanted you to choose me, I said softly. I didn't want you to lose yourself. He shook his head slowly. They are the same thing, Gianna. That's what you never understood. He signaled the waiter for the check, his movements mechanical and strange. I am going back to the hotel, he said, standing up. The air between us felt thin, unable to carry the weight of our history. I can't come home. Not tonight. Maybe not for a long time. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sharp. Leo, we can figure this out. You did the right thing. He looked down at me, his expression unfathomably sad. I did the necessary thing. That doesn't make it right. I watched him walk out of the bar, a ghost haunting his own life. The ride back to the apartment was a blur of city lights smearing against the taxi window. When I walked into our home, it felt like a museum exhibit of a marriage that had died centuries ago. My phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Leo. The subject line was stark. Forwarding, resignation. He had copied me on the final message to his family. It was the official proof of his sacrifice. But there was a second attachment, a PDF named simply, Gianna. I opened it, my fingers cold. It wasn't a love letter. It was an autopsy report of our relationship. I chose you, he wrote. But I think we both know I didn't choose us. I chose the principle of you. And it cost me the only world I knew. The words blurred on the screen. The man you loved was a Lockwood. He doesn't exist anymore. Don't wait for a ghost to come home. I dropped the phone onto the sofa cushions, the screen glowing in the dim room. The silence I had weaponized against his family now turned its barrel on me. I had won respect. I had toppled the queen and checked the king. But the board was empty. I looked at the red roses on the table, now drooping slightly, their velvet edges curling brown. They were a tribute to a powerful woman, sent by a powerful man. But tonight, they looked like funeral flowers for my marriage. I walked to the window, where Leo had stood just days ago adjusting his tie. The reflection showed a woman who looked composed, formidable, and entirely alone. I had demanded he choose the marriage over the bloodline. He had done exactly that, and the strain had snapped his spine. I pressed my hand against the cold glass, watching the city breathe below. I was the architect of my own justice, standing in the ruins of the home I had tried to save. The victory tasted like ash. The morning sun felt intrusive, exposing the dust motes dancing in the silent apartment. I hadn't slept, my eyes gritty and dry. The doorbell rang at 9 sharp, a precise, demanding sound that made my stomach turn. I expected a courier with divorce papers, or perhaps Marcus with a final threat. I didn't expect to see Eleanor Lockwood standing in the hallway alone. She wore no makeup, her face a map of sleepless nights. She held a small, silver-wrapped box like a grenade. She waited. "May I come in?" Her voice was a whisper, stripped of its usual imperious edge. I stepped back, the motion automatic. Eleanor walked into the living room, her steps tentative on the hardwood she used to criticize. She didn't sit. She just stood near the window, looking at the city view, as if it were a foreign country. "He really did it," she said softly, not looking at me. "He resigned. Gregory hasn't spoken a word since he read the email." "You broke the spell, Gianna?" I folded my arms, protecting my chest from her sudden fragility. "I didn't break him, Eleanor. I just asked him to stand up." She turned then, extending the silver box toward me with a trembling hand. "I know. That's why I brought you this." I took it, the package heavy and dense. "Is it a bribe?" I asked, my voice cold. She shook her head slowly, a tear tracking through the powder on her cheek. "No. It's the reason." "Open it." I tore the paper, revealing a cracked leather journal that smelled of lavender and old malice. The lock was broken, hanging by a rusted hinge. Inside, the handwriting was spidery and sharp, etched into the paper with cruel precision. "It belonged to Agatha," Eleanor explained, her voice hollow. "Gregory's mother. She gave it to me the day I returned from my honeymoon." I flipped open the cover. The first entry was dated 40 years ago. "Eleanor is soft," it read. "She lacks the necessary spine." I turned the pages, my stomach churning. March 12th, her accent is too provincial. I corrected her at dinner. June 4th, she cried when I excluded her parents from the gala list. Weakness must be purged. Asterisk, it was a manual of torture. A daily log of how to dismantle a young woman's soul. "She made me read it?" Eleanor whispered, sinking onto the sofa. "Every Sunday. She taught me that love was conditional. That family was a fortress you had to earn." I looked up at the woman I had hated for 6 years. The monster was just a victim who had learned the wrong lesson. "When she died," Eleanor said, staring at her hands, "I didn't throw it away. I kept it. I became her. I thought that was how you survived." She looked at me with devastating clarity. "You were my test, Gianna. If I could make you feel small, then I was finally big. I was finally a real Lockwood. I failed." "The engagement party," I said, realizing the depth of the sickness. "The family only rule. It wasn't about etiquette." Eleanor laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. "No, it was a hazing. Agatha did it to me for my brother-in-law's wedding." I sat in the kitchen while they toasted. She wiped her face, composing herself. "I wanted to see if you would break. Instead, you burned the house down. You had something I never had. You had a self outside of us." I placed the toxic book on the table, distancing myself from its radioactive history. "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "It doesn't fix anything." Eleanor stood up, smoothing her skirt with an old, reflexive vanity. "Because Leo is gone," she said simply. "He chose integrity over the inheritance. He broke the cycle I couldn't break. I hate you for ruining my life, Gianna. But I respect you for saving his soul. You forced him to be a man, not just a son. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the brass knob. The morning light caught the gray in her hair, no longer hidden by salon magic. He's at the Carlton, she said. He thinks he's destroyed. He doesn't know who he is without the firm. She looked back at me, her eyes dry and hard. You won the war, my dear. Now you have to decide if you want to leave the battlefield or help him bury the dead. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the journal. I touched the cracked leather cover, feeling the cold echo of Agatha's cruelty. I had thought I was fighting a snob, but I had been fighting a ghost. I looked at the red roses, then at the empty apartment. I hadn't just defeated an enemy, I had demolished a condemned building. The dust was settling, and for the first time, I could see the foundation. I grabbed my coat. As I reached for the door, my phone buzzed with a lead from Benji. A contact for a developer looking for new talent. I forwarded the number to Leo, then headed out. The willow tree by the river was a green curtain separating us from the city. I found Leo sitting at its base, staring at the muddy water. He wasn't wearing a suit. For the first time in 6 years, he wore a simple tee, shirt and jeans, looking like a man who had been stripped of his costume. He didn't hear me approach. The silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the smoke clears. I stepped onto the grass,